Betrayal Hub. Subscribe. Subscribe if you want relationship stories that feel uncomfortably familiar. She looked at me across the bedroom and said I was not getting anything tonight. Not tired, not stressed, not busy, just not getting anything. Her tone was light, almost amused, like she was flipping a switch she had installed months ago. She walked past me toward the bathroom, already removing her earrings, already done with the conversation. I did not argue. That surprised her. For the past few months, intimacy had turned into a negotiation, a reward, a withheld privilege. Some nights, she would lean in close at events, hand on my chest, playing the part of the wife who adored her husband. Then, behind closed doors, she would pull back and say she needed space, that she was exhausted from planning another launch party, that I needed to understand how demanding her world was. Her name is Lauren. She produces high-profile events for brands that live off noise and flash. She thrives in rooms where music drowns out doubt and promises are signed over champagne. I build residential towers in the same city. Concrete, contracts, inspections, long-term commitments. My name is on permits, on bank documents, on steel. That night, while she brushed her teeth, her phone lit up on the nightstand. The screen flashed with a name I knew well. Victor Hale, owner of a chain of nightclubs downtown. A man who once came to my office asking to lease space in one of our mixed-use developments. I declined. Too many complaints. Too many problems following him from city to city. Lauren had called me cautious back then, said I was missing out on easy money. Now his name glowed in the dark beside our bed. She saw me notice it. She turned the phone face down without breaking her routine. Later, she said she had an early meeting near the River District in the morning. That was the same district where I was overseeing a redevelopment project. The same block where Victor's flagship club sat under scaffolding, waiting on city approval for expansion. I lay beside her while she scrolled under the covers, her face lit blue by messages she did not share. She did not touch me. She did not need to. Control had already shifted. What she did not know was that in my line of work, contractors talk, and they had already started. The first time I heard Victor's name connected to Lauren, it was not from her. It was from a subcontractor. We were standing near the construction fence around the River District project, reviewing facade materials, when one of the site's supervisors made an offhand comment. He said he had seen my wife in the VIP section at Hale's club the night before. Said she seemed to be handling some kind of private event upstairs. He did not say it with suspicion, just information. The way people pass along weather updates. I asked which club. He pointed behind us, across the street, to the building still wrapped in scaffolding. Victor's flagship location. The one pushing for an expansion permit that required city approval and structural compliance from my firm. I nodded and changed the subject. That evening, Lauren came home later than usual. She smelled like smoke machines and expensive perfume. She kissed my cheek lightly, more out of habit than affection, and told me the event had gone great. She said the client was thrilled. She said Victor's team had been surprisingly professional. She said his name casually. I watched her while she spoke. She moved through the kitchen like she owned the narrative, pouring sparkling water, checking her phone, smiling at messages that were not from me. I did not ask what she was doing in his VIP section. Instead, I told her that the city had requested additional documentation for the River District expansion. She froze for half a second, barely noticeable. Then she recovered and said that kind of delay was normal. Later that night, after she went to shower, her phone buzzed again on the counter. A preview lit up the screen. Victor had sent a message about last night and added a private joke I did not recognize. I did not open it. I did not need to. The next morning, I arrived at the construction site early. I reviewed the pending approvals. I looked at the infrastructure commitments tied to the club's expansion. My company's name was attached to more than just concrete. We were part of the framework holding that building upright. Lauren texted around midday. She said she missed me. She added a winking emoji. I replied with a neutral acknowledgement. By evening, she told me she would be at the club again. Said she had to oversee a walkthrough in the VIP area. She asked if that bothered me. I told her it did not. And for the first time, I meant it. 2 nights later, she did not come home until morning. She had said the walkthrough might run late. Said the city inspectors were being difficult. Said Victor wanted everything perfect before submitting final paperwork. I did not question it. Around midnight, one of my project managers sent me a photo by accident. It was meant for another partner in our firm. The message apologized immediately, saying wrong thread. But I had already seen it. The photo showed the VIP balcony inside Victor's club. The lights were low, the dance floor below packed. In the corner of the frame, partially blurred, Lauren was leaning against the railing. Victor stood close behind her, his hand resting low on her back. Not professional, not distant, intimate. I did not reply to the message. I did not mention it the next morning when Lauren walked into the house in the same dress she had left in. She said the inspectors had finally signed off on preliminary items. She said Victor was relieved. She said it had been a long night. She did not say where she had slept. Instead, she moved through the house like she was managing a stage. Confident, controlled. She paused in the doorway and asked if I was upset. I told her I was busy. That afternoon, I called a meeting with my legal team. Not dramatic. Routine. I asked them to review our involvement in the River District redevelopment, specifically the mixed-use segment that housed the club. I asked about withdrawal clauses, about minority funding structures tied to the private investment fund where I held a stake. They pulled the documents. Our firm was not just a builder. Through the fund, we had extended infrastructure financing that made the expansion viable. Parking modifications, utility upgrades, structural reinforcement. Without those pieces, the club's expansion stalled. I listened quietly while they outlined the implications of stepping back. It would not shut the club down. It would not destroy Victor. It would remove the scaffolding he was leaning on. That evening, Lauren stood in the bedroom doorway again. She told me she was not in the mood. Her tone was sharper this time. Testing. I set my phone down on the nightstand and told her that was fine. No reaction. No negotiation. She studied me, waiting for frustration, waiting for a crack. There was none. What she did not realize was that while she was deciding what I was not getting tonight, I was deciding what I would no longer fund tomorrow. The next morning, I withdrew from the River District reconstruction agreement. Not loudly, not publicly. I requested a formal review of our firm's participation in the mixed-use redevelopment segment. I cited shifting priorities and reallocation of capital to other residential projects. My partners were surprised, but not suspicious. In our business, decisions move when numbers change. By afternoon, the fund where I held a minority stake received notice that I would be pulling my portion of infrastructure financing tied to Victor's expansion. It was structured legally, carefully. No breach, no theatrics, just absence. Without that financing, the structural reinforcement for the club's additional floor would be delayed. Without reinforcement, city approval would stall. Investors do not like stalled projects. I left the office and drove past the River District before heading home. Scaffolding wrapped around Victor's building like a temporary promise. Workers moved slowly along the perimeter, unaware that the foundation beneath their schedule had just shifted. That evening, Lauren was dressed for another event. Black dress, gold heels, the kind she wore when she wanted to be noticed. She asked if I would be home late. Her tone was casual, but her eyes were searching. I told her I had meetings. She nodded and said she might stop by the club after her event. Said Victor had invited her to review some changes in the VIP layout. I did not react. Later that night, one of my partners called. He said Victor's team had been informed that infrastructure support was being reconsidered. He said Victor sounded irritated, asking who had triggered the review. I told him it was an internal decision. When Lauren came home early morning, her energy was different. Not triumphant, not playful. She asked if something was happening with the River District project. I asked what she meant. She said Victor had mentioned delays. Said investors were asking questions. Said permits were suddenly under additional scrutiny. I shrugged and said development is complicated. She stared at me longer than usual. For the first time since this started, she looked uncertain. That night, she did not say I was not getting anything. She did not say anything at all. But her phone kept lighting up beside the bed, and the name on the screen was no longer confident. It was impatient. Within a week, the shift became visible. City inspectors requested additional compliance reviews for the River District expansion. Investors who had been ready to sign off on the second phase asked for updated projections. My firm was no longer listed as the structural backer on the revised documents. Victor's club was still open. Music still poured out onto the sidewalk at night. But the scaffolding stayed in place longer than planned. Deliveries slowed. Contractors began asking when funding would resume. It did not. Lauren started coming home earlier. Not every night, but enough to notice. She would stand in the kitchen, phone in hand, reading messages with a tight jaw. Sometimes she would type quickly, then erase, then type again. Her energy was no longer playful. It was reactive. One evening, she asked directly if I had stepped back from the River District project. I told her our firm had adjusted its portfolio. She asked if it had anything to do with Victor. I told her business decisions are based on risk. She held my gaze longer than usual, like she was trying to find the edge of my anger. There was none. That unsettled her more than if I had raised my voice. Later that night, I overheard part of her call from the living room. She kept her voice low, but the frustration carried. She told Victor he needed to handle his investors. She told him she could not fix structural delays. She told him she was not responsible for funding gaps. There was a pause. Then she said he had promised the expansion would go through. The word promised lingered. The next morning, I met with my attorney. I did not mention Victor. I did not mention the club. I asked about formal asset separation, about filing for divorce without public statements, about protecting our company's reputation from unnecessary exposure. The paperwork began moving quietly. That evening, Lauren stood in the doorway again, but this time she did not control the tone. She asked if we needed to talk. I told her I had nothing new to add. She said we were drifting. I told her I had already stepped aside. Her phone buzzed mid-conversation. She looked at the screen and did not smile. For the first time since she said I was not getting anything, she was the one being denied something she thought was guaranteed. The divorce papers were delivered on a weekday afternoon. No warning. No discussion. A courier handed them to Lauren at home while I was at the office. By the time I returned that evening, the envelope was open on the dining table, pages spread out like something fragile that had been dropped. She was sitting in the chair across from it, phone in her hand, unread messages piling up on the screen. She did not shout. She asked if this was real. I told her it was filed. She said I was overreacting. She said we had not even had a real conversation about any of this. She said marriages do not end over business shifts and rumors. I did not mention the photo from the VIP balcony. I did not mention the contractors who had described her nights in more detail than she realized. I did not need to. Instead, I told her that I do not negotiate for access to my own wife. The words landed quietly. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and muted the call without answering. Victor's name flashed briefly before disappearing. She stood up and walked toward me, trying to close the distance that had been widening for weeks. She said Victor had nothing to do with our marriage. She said his project was separate. She said I was making everything collapse at once. I told her I was not collapsing anything. I was stepping out. The next morning, news circulated among investors that the River District expansion was officially postponed pending revised financing. Victor's club would remain operational, but the growth he had been promising was frozen. Lauren did not go to the club that night. She stayed home. She walked through the house like it was unfamiliar. She opened drawers, closed them. She asked if there was still time to fix this. I did not answer immediately. Her phone buzzed again on the counter. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. For the first time, she silenced it without hesitation. Later that evening, she said we needed to talk. I told her I had already said everything when I stopped reacting. She stared at me, searching for anger, for weakness, for something she could work with. There was nothing left to negotiate. And that was when she realized control had changed hands without a single argument. The messages started coming every morning. We need to talk. No emojis. No attitude. Just that sentence, repeated like a reminder she could not silence. I did not block her. I did not mute the thread. I read them. I did not respond. At the office, I signed the final documents separating our shared assets. Properties were divided cleanly. Accounts reassigned. My attorney moved efficiently, the way professionals do when there is no public drama to manage. Lauren began calling instead of texting. I answered once. She asked if I was really going through with this. She said the club's expansion was stalled indefinitely. She said Victor's investors were pulling back. She said the entire River District deal was unraveling. I told her that projects survive when their foundations are stable. She went quiet. That evening, she showed up at my office unannounced. Not dressed for an event. Not styled for a party. Just Lauren, standing in the lobby under fluorescent lighting that did not flatter anyone. She asked the receptionist if I had a few minutes. I let her in. She stood across from my desk, hands clasped like she was negotiating a contract instead of a marriage. She said Victor had overpromised. She said he had assumed my firm would always back the infrastructure. She said she had not realized how connected everything was. I told her it was not complicated. She said she ended things with him, that she had stopped going to the club, that she wanted to focus on us. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were searching for leverage. I did not ask for proof. Instead, I slid a copy of the finalized filing across the desk toward her. She looked down at the stamped date. She asked if this was revenge. I told her it was alignment. I stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Before she left, she said she had never thought I would actually make it final. I told her I had made it final the night she turned our marriage into a negotiation. The next morning, another message appeared. We need to talk. This time I replied. I already did, when I stayed silent. After that message, she stopped texting every morning. For a few days, there was nothing. Then the calls started coming from unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail. One afternoon, a mutual acquaintance from the development board mentioned that Victor's flagship club had postponed its grand reopening indefinitely. Investors were restructuring. Expansion plans were suspended. The scaffolding in the River District remained in place, but no one was working on it. The building stood there half-promised, half-finished. Lauren showed up at the house again that weekend to collect the last of her things. The atmosphere was different now. Not tense, just stripped down. She moved through the rooms slowly, packing dresses into garment bags, sliding framed photos into a box without looking at them. The house felt like a stage after the event lights had been turned off. She paused in the kitchen and asked if I was happy with how things turned out. I told her I did not measure outcomes that way. She said Victor had blamed her for introducing instability into his expansion. She said his investors questioned her judgment. She said doors in her industry were quietly closing. I listened. She said she never expected everything to unravel so quickly. She said she thought she could keep worlds separate, that she could manage both. I did not correct her. Instead, I carried one of her boxes to the door and set it beside the others. Before leaving, she stood in the entryway and asked if there was any path back. Not dramatic, not pleading, just asking. I told her that I do not rebuild on land where the foundation was deliberately cracked. She nodded slowly, like she understood more than she wanted to admit. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it and let it ring out. When she walked down the driveway, she did not look back. That evening, I drove past the River District on my way home from a meeting. Victor's club lights were dimmer than usual. The scaffolding still wrapped around the upper floors, untouched. I did not stop. I did not slow down. For the first time in months, the noise from that block did not reach me. The final hearing was brief. No raised voices. No accusations read into the record. Just signatures, confirmation, and the quiet acknowledgement that the marriage was legally over. Lauren did not try to argue in court. She stood composed, answering procedural questions, avoiding my eyes. When it was done, she gathered her folder and walked out ahead of me. Outside the courthouse, she waited by the steps. She asked if this was really how it ended. I told her it ended the night she decided I was optional. She did not respond to that. In the weeks that followed, I heard updates without asking. The River District project was reassigned to a different developer, one unwilling to take on Victor's expansion risk. Without new infrastructure backing, the upper-level renovation was canceled. The club continued operating, but the promised growth, the media buzz, the investor dinners in the unfinished VIP lounge all disappeared. Lauren's event contracts shifted. Fewer high-profile launches. More short-term gigs. The kind that fill a calendar but not a reputation. One evening, she called from a new number. I answered. Her voice was steady, not defensive. She said she understood now that I had not tried to destroy anything. She said I had simply removed myself. She said the difference had taken her too long to see. I did not argue. She asked if I ever considered giving us another chance. I told her I had given us chances when I stayed silent the first time she withheld affection like it was leverage. I told her I had given us chances when I saw the photo and chose not to confront her publicly. I told her every quiet step I took had been a chance. She was quiet on the other end. She said she thought I would fight. I told her I build structures meant to last. When the foundation is compromised on purpose, I do not patch over it. I step away before the collapse becomes public. There was a long pause. She said she miscalculated. I told her I did not. When the call ended, I set my phone down and returned to reviewing blueprints for a new residential project downtown. The lines were clean, the plans precise. No scaffolding, no unstable promises, just structure. And this time, my name stood alone on the permit. Months later, the River District looked different. The scaffolding around Victor's club was gone, but not because the expansion was completed. The city required it removed once the project was officially canceled. The upper floors remained as they had been before the promises, plain and unfinished. The club still opened at night. Music still spilled into the street. But the line outside was shorter. The press mentions faded. Investors moved on to other ventures. Lauren sent one last message near the end of summer. "We need to talk." It had been months since the divorce was finalized. Months since she had moved out. Months since I had stepped fully into projects that did not require defending my reputation at home. I did not answer immediately. Later that evening, I drove past the River District again. Construction cranes moved against the skyline for a different development, one my firm had taken on after withdrawing from Victor's expansion. Steel beams rose clean and deliberate, unconnected to any nightclub or late-night promises. My phone buzzed again. "We need to talk." I pulled over briefly and typed a single response. I already said everything when I stopped reacting. A few minutes later, she replied. She said she understood now. She said she mistook silence for weakness. She said she thought control meant power. She said she did not realize that walking away without noise was its own decision. I did not continue the conversation. Instead, I turned the phone face down and drove on. At the next red light, I could see the edge of Victor's building in the distance. Dim lights. No expansion. No banners announcing growth. Just a structure that had reached its limit. Back at my office, the plans for the new residential tower were laid out across the conference table. My partners were discussing timelines, materials, long-term leasing agreements. No shortcuts. No unstable alliances. When the meeting ended, I stood alone for a moment, looking out over the city blocks we were reshaping. I did not feel victorious. I felt aligned. She had cut me off without warning. I made it final without noise. And I never needed to raise my voice to be heard.